they finally found him in an area where they'd searched a number of times. The authorities had searched, and he was healthy. He was fine. He really wasn't dirty. He wasn't, he'd eaten, and he said a bear kept him safe.
Well, I don't think it was a bear, number one. I think he probably was protected by a Bigfoot. But, going about in the book 411, there was cases where I still remember this one so distinctly, where the father and the mother were putting up a tent, and the boy was like 20 feet away from the father, and the father was keeping the eyes on his son. And then he took his eyes off his son for a minute. His son wasn't there. So they made a massive, search, the rangers and the volunteers trying to find the boy. Now, there was creeks, rivers, and all that in the area. They find the remains of the boy 15 miles away on the side of a mountain. So, I mean...
Yeah, and that's not the only case like that he's talked about. How is that possible?
It isn't. It is not. No way a 5-year-old boy is, number one, going to go across a creek, let alone go across a raging river and then be able to walk 15 miles and be up on the side of a mountain. It's not going to happen, and not in a short time of frame.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Something else was involved. And, given it in a number of these cases, how, it's in a national forest. I mean, and a lot of times there's really no place to drive from here to there. So it's not a human grabbing this kid and taking off with him. It's got to be something else. And it could be a Bigfoot. It could be something else. I don't know. But something mysterious is happening. And some of these cases, again, like the boy in North Carolina, and like a case that David Polite has talked about, a girl who disappeared, a really young girl, she was about 4 or 5, who said that the bear man fed her berries and ate her hat.
Oh, wow.
What do you make of that? Bear man?
I think it was probably a Bigfoot. There's your example.
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah. That's why I don't go camping anymore. I have no desire to go out in the woods. I don't want to see anything like that. One time in my lifetime was enough. I'll let somebody else find one. There's been a lot of people that claim that they've been out in the woods. They heard the wood knock. They heard rocks go flying towards them. But, again, they never saw a Bigfoot. So I don't know. I think in my case, me and my friend, we just happened to be at the right place at the wrong time and ran into one. And that's how it's going to happen. You're not going to find, if you're out looking for one, you're not going to find one.
Right. Well, and that goes into about everything. Because I've written a couple of books just specifically on ghosts, and I've discovered, because I'm a journalist, and I go to the places that are supposedly haunted, and I interview people who've encountered things, and I do historical research on it. And there have only been a couple of times in the 100 or so haunted places I've been to where I've encountered something. Generally, if somebody goes out, looking for a ghost, they're not going to find it. And it's got to. I mean, with Bigfoot, I think it would be even worse.
Oh yeah,
just because of the fact that there aren't that many out there.
No, I don't. And this, I'm going to be blunt with you. I live up here in Gig Harbor, Washington. Moved here 20 years ago, and it's right across the canal from Tacoma, the peninsula. You go over, the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. You go a few miles, here's Gig Harbor. When I moved here 20 years ago, I moved here because there was no houses in my area. It was all like cedar trees, all, small forest area. And, after the first couple months being here, I noticed a bear and a cub walking down the driveway. I used to see deer all the time. I don't see any creatures probably after about 4 or 5 years that I was living here, because people started buying property, logging it out, and putting houses in. Now I'm the only one here 20 years later with a couple acres of cedar trees. No one else has any around here. But the thing is, where did all the bear go? Where did all the deer go?
Right. Well, they went to where people aren't. And here's something else when it comes to monsters in general. But because people are like, okay, we have inhabited, this continent human beings have encountered have lived here for how many thousands of years. But we now don't really believe in monsters. The ancestors did. The ones who lived here before Europeans came over, they knew monsters. They have them in their history. They've carved them into rocks. So the monsters that we occasionally hear about are there in our history that we discount. But we think we're more evolved than that, more intelligent than that. We're, this is 2019. There's no place that we haven't been in North America, and that's complete garbage. There are great swaths of this country. Let's go to Canada too. There's a lot of Canada that hasn't really been explored. It's been explored, but people just don't live there. There are great forests in the United States that people don't live there. Deserts, people don't live there. So there are plenty of places in the United States and North America in general that monsters have, plenty of room to roam.
Oh, yeah. Now, what's your feeling about Mothman? Because the reason why I say that, one of my guests, it comes on, Joe Taylor. He's the person that works for like the different museums. He goes and takes dinosaur bones and reconstructions, puts them together for the museums and stuff like that. So, he's very, adapt to things. But he had one of his friends come up to him and said that her friend physically ran into a Mothman with her car on the road and stopped. She got out of the car because she thought she hit a human and was looking at it and noticed the thing had wings, and it just kind of like stared at her and then kind of like flew away.
Interesting. What could you give me a little bit more description on what it looked like? I mean, what kind of wings?
Kind of like what I remember, like kind of like bat wings, kind of. The thing was probably about 5'7" or so, if I remember right. It did even supposedly put a dent in her fender of her car. And that's what she was, she thought she, first killed somebody, got out. It was standing there eye to eye for a minute with her. And it didn't sink into her head right away what it was. I mean, if you ran into something like that, I think just like my situation, I think she probably was in shock.
Well, she would have to be. Yeah, absolutely. She would have to be in shock. When it comes to Mothman, I'm really torn. Does something like that exist? There have been way too many, eyewitness sightings. The ones from the late '60s in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, of course, are the most famous, and it started appearing, and trying to warn people, going by John Keel's book, before the Silver Bridge collapsed, right before Christmas, and a number of people died. So and then it disappeared, and people didn't see it for years. But it also has been alleged to have appeared a number of different places where, disasters happened after it showed up. Have you followed Lon Strickler's work about, Mothman type sightings in Chicago over the last 2 years?
No, I really haven't.
Okay, because there have been Mothman like sightings. I mean, people have seen what looked like, the description of the Mothman, about a 6 foot plus tall humanoid with glowing red eyes, not really a neck, large wings. People have seen it, perched on buildings, have seen it flying through the air. A father and his son were walking through the park. They were just having a stroll through the park, and all of a sudden there was this big, black, blazing-eyed creature standing, looking at them. And when they realized, oh my God, what is this? It just took up and flew in the air. There hasn't been a big type disaster like the Silver Bridge, but Chicago has its own issues. And it was reported to have been seen in Minneapolis, St. Paul, when there was a bridge collapse a number of years ago. People reported seeing something like that when the Chernobyl accident happened. So this is one of those cases: is Mothman a flesh and blood creature, or is it, something more of the spirit realm when it shows up, as a harbinger of, some sort of doom that's going to happen, something bad that's going to happen. I really don't have a handle other than that.
I really don't either. Now, I got a question for you. R.W. Wells is asking, what about the Jersey Devil?
Well, the Jersey Devil is just a really fun story. Back in the let's look at the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. Jersey has this pine forest, and it's called the Barrens for a good reason, and that's because the ground is really acidic and not a lot will grow there. There were early settlers who built towns. They tried to farm the ground, and nothing really would grow. And the things that live there are like pitcher plants and poisonous vines and things like this that are very anti people. So there are a lot of ruins out there of villages that were built back in like the late 1600s, early 1700s. But there was supposedly in the 1700s a family called the Leeds that lived in the Pine Barrens. And Mother Leeds had 12 children, and she was pregnant with her 13th. And she said, she didn't want any more children. She was like, when this one comes out, it's going to be a devil. And she, when she went into labor, they had a midwife there. And the midwife, of course, did what she does, and which assisted with the birth. And the baby came out, and the baby looked like a normal baby for a very short period of time. And all of a sudden, it sprouted a tail that looked serpent-like. It grew where its hands and feet had been. It grew hooves. The head grew horse-like. It sprouted bat wings. And then it killed the midwife, so thank you very much for bringing me into this world. And it flew up out of the chimney and disappeared. And people have seen it for centuries. People still report seeing it. I think one of the, and it's not just in New Jersey, there was a case in Pennsylvania. I think it might have been Philadelphia in the 1800s, where firefighters were trying to put out a building, and they saw the Jersey Devil on top of the building, and tried to kill it, and it flew off. I think the most famous person who ever saw it, though, was I'm trying to think of his name. It might have been Nathan. It was Napoleon Bonaparte's. I think it was his brother who saw the Jersey Devil. But it's a fanciful story that still has legs after 300 plus years.
Yeah, interesting. Now, when we get into things like lizard men, now I'm not familiar with that one. Can you tell the listeners what the lizard man is?
Well, it depends on what lizard man you're talking about. There are a number of lizard men. It's there were a number of different cases. One was in I'm trying to think, in it might have been South Carolina. There was this was in the 80s, so it was, I should say, fairly recent, because a lot of my cases are from the early 1900s or the 1800s. But this one was from 1988 in South Carolina. There was a 17-year-old kid was driving. He was driving by a swamp, and he had a flat tire. So he stopped to change the tire. He changed the tire. How many 17-year-olds can do that today? But
yeah, not many.
That's beside the point. Anyway, so he got finished changing his tire, and he heard a thumping coming from behind him. And he turned toward it, and he saw a 7-foot-tall lizard on, running at him on 2 legs. And he jumped in the car and started to drive away. And the thing jumped on his car, and he launched itself on the roof. And the 17-year-old started swerving, and the creature eventually fell off, but it scratched. all across the roof of the car with its claws, and it also broke off the rear view mirror. And